Now, I want to start the conversation by asking you, how long have you and your brother Ray, the owners of the Whaling City Seafood Display Auction, been working to get these permits?
Well, we've been working about the last 8 months with lawyers in Boston, our local attorneys, accountants, etc., in which we spoke with Mayor Mitchell in New Bedford and came up with a global solution. You know, we wanted to keep everything in New Bedford. And at that time, Ray and I had to make a decision, do we want to do this?
Okay.
I'm 56 years old, Ray's 60 years old, and, you know, it's a big task to put among ourselves at this later stage in our life. And we thought and we believe that it's the right thing to do for New Bedford. The waterfront's been good for us since 1986, started the auction in 94, and we'd hate to see the industry collapse because of what Carlos did in the past.
Now, you've been working on it for the last 8 months. Have there been any speed bumps, any challenges? Do other people want these permits? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, there's groups up in Maine that believe that these permits should be dissolved back into the industry or even given back to them, in which, in reality, if they dissolve all these permits into the industry, every permit holder would receive anywhere between 200 to 300 pounds of each species. So it would not really gain anything for that permit holder, but it would destroy New Bedford.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the challengers, Richie?
Challenges are, you have a sector up in Maine that stated that, you know, that fish should go back to Maine. You have the governor of Maine stating that that fish should go back to Maine, and I'd like to comment on that. There is no draggers, large draggers, that land in the state of Maine only because Maine has a law that you cannot land lobsters in the state of Maine if you have a partial permit. You'd have to be a directed fishery to land, and that costs a dragger about $10,000 in stock per trip. So none of these boats are being landed in Maine because of the governor's law that they have in Maine. They're being landed in Massachusetts, Gloucester, Boston, and New Bedford. So there's really nothing that you can give to Maine other than the people that own permits, and they can lease that fish back to the boats in New Bedford.
Sure. NGOs?
Oh, NGOs, yes. I was told the other day that there was an NGO that, well, let's put it this way, that Carlos bought some of the permits up in Maine. Those permits were available. No one wanted to pay the price. They thought they'd get it for, a real bargain basement deal, and Carlos stepped in with a fair market value, and they sold the boats and permits to him. Number one was Barbara Stevenson, who sat on the council for years. There was Sammy Viola, and also there is Allison Jordan, which was he purchased the permits in 2015, I believe. Mm-hmm. And there was only one offer up in Maine, and that was from the NGO, and I believe it was Nature Conservancy. So do you want to see those permits go to an NGO where it could be put on a shelf, or the permit could be leased out to their favorites? That's happening since sectors.
Yes.
So it was a fair deal, and everyone wants it back now. Everyone's screaming, saying that they got hurt, etc. And I don't see any damage that was done.
Richie Canastra, along with his brother Ray Canastra, own the Whaling City Seafood Display Auction, and we're talking about the Codfather's fate of 13 fishing permits. What is the fate right now? Where does that stand?
Well, it's in the judge's hands. Those 13 permits, he did not rule on it yet. He did state that taking all 13 permits is an excessive fine, and we're still waiting to hear. Ray and I do have an offer on the table that we presented NOAA, and it's an offer of $93 million to buy Carlos out. And he would get out of the fishery completely. So Ray, in my mind, we came up with a deal which was blessed by John Mitchell, who was working with us on the deal for a global solution to keep everything in New Bedford, that he's out of the picture. He's out of the picture altogether, and Ray and I will run the business. And, Ray fished for 14 years. He knows vessels. We know boats. We know the business. And we're doing this to keep this in New Bedford. My plan is to get out hopefully in 10 years when things lighten up and it can be sold properly instead of this fire sale that people want everything for nothing.
Right. Has anyone questioned your relationship with Carlos, you and Ray and Carlos? Has anything been said about, well, there's, an unhealthy relationship going on here? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, people have their thoughts, and, I look at it this way. We are the largest fish auction in the United States, and Carlos Raphael is the largest boat owner on the East Coast.
Of course, you're going to have.
If we don't have relationships, then let me tell you a good story.
Yeah.
Through this negotiation with Carlos and his lawyers, and he didn't speak to me for 3 weeks because of the negotiation. It's we're friends, but we're battling it. Mm-hmm. We're battling back and forth.
Right.
And, we're trying to do what's good for New Bedford. I'm willing to go out on the limb. Ray's willing to go out on the limb to keep it here. But I think our biggest competitors here are the NGOs, people up in Maine that are in cahoots with the NGOs. They all have deals on their own, and we'll see what happens. Ray and I are a tool. We put together a deal. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, then God has something different for me.
Mm-hmm. When do you think the timeline? When do you think the judge will decide?
Well, I know Carlos is being sentenced on November 6th. He's going away on November 6th. Don't know. I thought it was going to be last Friday. We're still waiting to see what makes sense.
Did it surprise you that the judge dismissed Brian Rothschild's study as saying that this really didn't have much of an effect on the fish stock?
Yes, it did. Personally, I don't think he really understood it. To understand the fishery, you'd have to be studying it for at least a good year. It just really doesn't make sense with rules and regulations, etc. But I can say that the Science Center and what they're saying, what's out there they're saying there's no codfish out there, etc. These boats cannot stay away from codfish. And it's almost like with if anyone that fishes saying that they don't discard codfish, I would have to say that either they're really blessed or it does happen, and we call it in the industry the biggest sin that could happen.
Mm-hmm. With your deal, you say that you're going to get Carlos Raphael out of the fishing industry completely.
That's the deal, and that's the total deal where he would step out. Obviously, he'll be holding some paper, some money on the deal itself. Ray and I will be doing financing with a local bank that we do business with, and they're very supportive of the deal. But he will be out of the picture completely.
Is anyone else interested locally in purchasing these?
No one locally, but there has been big corporations that have been approached Carlos himself, and also approached Ray and I, if the deal goes through, that they want to step in, and Ray and I will not let that happen. We want to keep it locally, and there won't be a fire sale to these big corporations, or not even corporation investors.